Now we'd like to take you on a journey on what it's like birthing while Black in California. We'll walk you through scenarios and we'll highlight a few areas from our report that are related to each of these scenarios. And so I will now hand it over to Ria to take us through the first one.
Thank you, Solaire. In this first scenario, imagine you're working the front desk at Program CBO. You're coming up towards the end of your shift and want to leave on time today. Your last client shows up almost 30 minutes late. She comes into the office with an attitude and appears to be very annoyed. How would you respond to this client? A, match her attitude and tell her she must reschedule her appointment. B, quickly speed through the intake and ignore her attitude. Or C, do a modified version of the intake and find out what's really going on with her. Feel free to type your answer in the chat. There is no right or wrong answer. Now, let's keep that scenario in mind. On her way to the appointment, the mom received a call from her son's school to pick him up immediately due to behavioral issues. This is very frustrating because they are always calling her about issues related to her son, and she feels racism is at play. This program was her only option for services, and it's at an inconvenient location. Once she got to the building, the elevator wasn't working, and she had to take 3 flights of stairs at 30 weeks pregnant with back pain. How would you respond now? Would you change your answer? Do you think there's a more equitable approach now knowing what you know?
And so that leads us to one of our first recommendations, providing respectful care that's free of anti-Black racism to the birthing person as well as their support network. And so thinking about the scenario that we just went through and finding out what was kind of going on beneath the surface, I think it's important for all of us to remember that structural racism is embedded into the fabric of our society. Holding an empathetic mindset and heart space for people, recognizing that Black birthing people are battling several experiences of anti-Blackness from the minute they walk out of their door every day, and that we need to be truly respectful in our communications with Black women and birthing people and their support networks. We need to provide information and resources regarding care, improve consistency and continuity of care, and build trust with the Black community by intently listening. On the slide are a couple of quotes from our focus group participants that highlight this. And the first is, one of the things I realized is in 7 pregnancies, 5 births, and 4 children, I don't think I ever had a positive experience. What I finally realized is I trusted the staff medical team thinking they would have my best interests in mind, when in reality that wasn't the case. Another participant says, respect us too, the same way you respect others. The same care that you're giving other people, give that to me too. And so what this recommendation looks like in practice is having relevant and Black-centered resources on hand, uplifting fatherhood programs and initiatives, being willing to share complete information regarding care and care options, and respecting support systems. And to explore this theme and more, please download the report and dig in, and we'll move on to the next scenario.
Thank you, Alexis. For our next scenario, a Black woman recently gave birth on your floor. Her husband has asked multiple times to check on his wife, but you see her talking visibly fine and she hasn't made any requests for you. You recently heard that Black people are relational. So in an effort to connect, you say to the mom, tell your baby daddy to relax in a lighthearted, joking way so you can tend to other patients. The husband yells at you, why are you ignoring me? How would you respond to the husband's frustration? A, dismiss him and let him know you have 2 or 3 more patients and then you'll return. B, check with the mom and figure out what's going on. Or C, call security. Let's take a deeper look. The husband recently completed a fatherhood group series and was empowered with information about that advocating for his partner. He wanted to make sure you know that his wife has a history of hypertension and was noted as a high-risk patient. At this point, here are some things for you to consider as a provider. Black mothers and infants experience a higher risk of morbidity and mortality. Black people are often dismissed and ignored in medical settings. Black people face more policing and retaliation. Negligence can lead to near misses or even death. Going back to the scenario, does this change your answer?
So one of the themes from our findings in our report is that implicit bias training is only a starting point. It is not enough to take, for example, a 1-hour implicit bias course, check off a box and keep it moving in the hopes of change, right? Racial discrimination prevents Black mothers and families from receiving proper and equitable care at hospitals and clinics. And we know that these types of experiences directly impact the well-being and health outcomes of both the birthing person and the newborn. And in the worst cases can even lead to or result in infant or maternal mortality. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with For Cure for Moms founder, Charles Johnson, who lost his wife, Kira Johnson, after she bled internally post C-section due to neglect. Her death was preventable. And over 90% of the Black moms that we spoke to in our focus groups experienced negligence and lack of care by providers, hospital staff, and members of their care team during their prenatal, childbirth, and postnatal care. And so one of the recommendations in our report is to boost the effectiveness of anti-racism trainings. We desperately need quality anti-racism trainings that focus on addressing anti-Blackness specifically, and that can translate to actual practice. And we desperately need a system of accountability to be tied to this. I'll hand it back to Ria to walk us through our next scenario.
Thank you, Soler. For our next scenario, imagine you are an office manager at Company LLC. Your employee who's supposed to be returning from maternity leave has used all their paid leave time off and is requesting additional paid time off. How would you respond? A, deny the request and let her know she needs to return to work by X date. B, inform her that she has no more time off and suggest that she submit a letter of resignation as an alternative. Or C, advocate for more paid time off for your staff. Type your response in the chat. What are some things this mom could be facing during her maternity leave? Well, she's not ready mentally or emotionally and could be dealing with postpartum depression. She does not have the means or access to childcare. There is a lack of social support. This mom is still physically healing from emergency postpartum surgery. With that background, does your answer change? Is there a more equitable approach?
And so our recommendation around this is to enhance perinatal and postpartum support to fully meet the needs of Black families. And we know that all mothers and birthing people can benefit from strengthening perinatal and postpartum services, as there are huge gaps in the availability of these services and the actual need for them. And structural racism has further widened those gaps for Black families. So some of the things that we can do is advocate for increasing paid family medical leave options, advanced care options for Black birthing people that include all social determinants of health, support the understanding and implementation of SB 65, and invest in administrative and other supports for birth workers who serve Black communities. We all have a role to play, and we all can take action from wherever we sit. That can look like raising awareness, sharing information, supporting policy actions, or even being creative about how you support the pregnant and postpartum people in your life and that you work with. Next slide. And so we want to really thank you for actively participating in these scenarios. For us, this report was so important, and we know this issue is important to all of you as well. I see so many familiar names and faces, as well as new names and faces, and that excites me for where we can go on this road to Black birth justice. We now have this report. We have something in hand that's tangible that we can use to get us started on the road to achieving Black birth justice and eventually arriving at that destination and beyond. And so I'm excited, the team is excited. I hope you all are excited too about us finally giving Black birthing people the justice that they deserve. And we will now hear from Malia Cohen.